The breath leaves your lungs in crystalline clouds. Your feet crunch through snow that hasn't melted in 10,000 years. You turn north and see a wall of ice stretching to the horizon. This ice doesn't belong in a freezer. It doesn't belong on a mountain peak. This ice is alive. It towers 4 kilometers into the sky. A frozen tsunami suspended in time, grinding continents to dust beneath its weight. The Laurentide ice sheet, larger than modern-day Europe, has swallowed everything you know as North America. Where Chicago should stand, only blue-white death stretches endlessly upward. You're standing in 15,000 BCE, and Earth is not the planet you remember. The silence here cuts deeper than the cold. No birds sing, no rivers flow. The only sound is the ice itself, groaning, cracking, breathing as it shifts its impossible mass. Each breath could flatten a city. But here's what they don't teach you in school. Here's the truth buried in ice cores and ancient bones, the secret written in stone that archaeologists whisper about but never shout. This world, this frozen hell, shaped every myth, every flood story, every tale of giants and lost kingdoms that humanity has ever told. And if you think you're safe because that world is gone, you're wrong. Subscribe now. Buckle in. What you're about to hear isn't just history, it's the dark blueprint hidden in humanity's oldest nightmares. The scroll no scholar dared to read. Walk with me through this alien Earth. Europe is a wasteland. The Fenno-Scandinavian ice sheet has crushed Scandinavia, buried the Baltic Sea, and ground the landscape into frozen rubble. Where London should stand, glaciers scrape bedrock. Where Paris should bloom, only tundra and howling wind. The planet has dropped 6 degrees Celsius. That number sounds small until you realize it means death. The poles are 20 degrees colder than today. Antarctica has become a frozen dimension where even the air turns solid. But humans are here. They huddle around fires that they cannot let die. One ember lost means death for the entire tribe. Their children know the taste of mammoth bone marrow before they know their own names. They carve tools from the tusks of giants because metal doesn't exist yet, won't exist for thousands of years. These people have no cities, no farms, no kings. They have something else. They have stories. Around those sacred fires as ice storms howl outside their caves, they tell tales of worlds beyond the north wind, of lands where eternal winter rules, where giants walk, where spirits of ice and shadow wage war against the warmth of human hearts. The Norse would later call it Niflheim, the primordial realm of ice and mist. The Greeks spoke of Hyperborea, the mysterious land beyond the north wind where Apollo went when winter came. The Inuit knew of Sedna, the sea goddess, who controlled the ice and could drown the world in frozen darkness. These weren't fairy tales. These were memories. Every culture on Earth remembers this time. Deep in their bones, in their oldest prayers and darkest dreams, they remember when giants made of ice held the world hostage. When the sea retreated so far that continents appeared overnight. When creatures the size of houses roamed grasslands that stretched from one end of the earth to the other. They remember because their ancestors lived it. But here's what makes your blood run cold. This wasn't gradual. This wasn't a gentle slide into winter. Climate change, real climate change, happens in decades, not centuries. The ice sheets didn't slowly creep across the land. They exploded across continents like frozen tsunamis. Temperatures plunged, species died, entire ways of life vanished in a single human lifetime. Sound familiar?
The mammoth hunters of Siberia went to sleep one autumn, expecting winter to end. It didn't end for 10,000 years.
Families who had lived by warm coastlines for generations watched the sea retreat mile by mile, year by year, until their fishing boats sat stranded hundreds of kilometers from water. They followed the retreating shoreline, following the fish, following life itself as the earth transformed around them. The lucky ones adapted. They learned to hunt in the cold. They learned to read the language of ice and wind. They learned to make clothing that could keep a human alive when the air itself wanted to kill them. The unlucky ones became fossils. But survival wasn't just about staying warm, it was about staying human. In the caves of Chauvet, by flickering firelight, someone took charcoal in their hands and drew lions on stone walls. Not just any lions, cave lions, the massive predators that stalked the mammoth steppes. Lions with eyes that showed intelligence, purpose, perhaps even recognition. These weren't primitive scratches, these were portraits, art created by human hands that understood beauty, even when beauty was buried under miles of ice. Why? Why create art when survival demanded every moment, every calorie, every heartbeat? Because art was survival. Stories were survival. Beauty was the one thing that separated humans from the ice itself. While glaciers ground continents to dust, humans were painting masterpieces in caves in France. While saber-toothed cats hunted in packs and dire wolves howled across frozen plains, humans were carving flutes from mammoth bones and creating music. The ice wanted to crush them. The cold wanted to freeze them. The darkness wanted to swallow them. Instead, they created light. But light cast shadows, and in those shadows, something was stirring. The ice sheets weren't just frozen water. They were massive enough to bend the Earth's crust, to change the spin of the planet itself. Under their weight, the land sank. When they moved, and they did move, they carved rivers, created lakes, and reshaped entire continents. They were rewriting the map of the world. And here's the terrifying truth. They were also rewriting the map of human migration, forcing our species into narrow corridors, isolated refuges, frozen bridges between continents that existed for just a few thousand years before vanishing forever. Humans didn't choose where to go. The ice chose for them. It pushed them south into what would become Spain, Italy, the Balkans, tiny pockets of warmth in a frozen world. It opened a corridor between Siberia and Alaska that would let them walk into an entire new continent. It connected Australia to New Guinea, creating land masses larger than anything that exists today. Then it erased those lands forever. But some secrets don't stay buried. In Siberia, mammoth tusks still emerge from melting permafrost with flesh so fresh that dogs will eat it. In Alaska, gold miners find cave bear skulls the size of engine blocks. In the North Sea, fishing nets pull up bones from creatures that haven't walked the earth for 12,000 years. The ice preserved them, kept them perfect, waiting. And sometimes, those bones tell stories that make archaeologists lose sleep. Mammoth remains with cut marks from human tools, cave paintings that show humans hunting creatures that science says they never should have encountered, carved ivory figurines depicting animals that went extinct before agriculture even existed. How did they know what these animals looked like? How did isolated tribes, separated by thousands of miles, all describe the same giants, the same floods, the same stories of ice and darkness and the long night that almost never ended? The answer is written in the ice itself, in the bones, in the caves where humans painted their fears and dreams on stone walls that would outlast empires. This wasn't just a cold Earth. This was a different Earth, a planet where the rules of geography, climate, and survival had been rewritten by ice, where continents existed that are now drowned beneath hundreds of meters of ocean, where creatures larger than elephants grazed on grasslands that stretched from Europe to Alaska without interruption, where humans learned that the world could change overnight, that safety was temporary, that the ground beneath their feet, the coastlines they called home, the very air they breathed, all of it could vanish faster than a generation could adapt. They learned to live with apocalypse as a daily reality, and they passed those lessons down in the only way they could, through stories, myths, legends whispered around fires that they prayed would never die. The Norse spoke of Ragnarok, the end of the world in ice and fire. The Greeks told of great floods that swallowed civilizations. Every culture on Earth has tales of giants, of lands swallowed by rising waters, of ages when the world itself was the enemy. Because it was. But here's what the archaeologists won't tell you. Here's the secret that keeps them awake at night, checking and rechecking their data. The ice didn't just preserve bones and artifacts. It preserved something else. Something that suggests this wasn't the first time Earth had played this game. That deep under the ice sheets, in places no human has ever seen, there might be evidence of cycles far older than our species, of rises and falls that make the Ice Age look like a brief shiver in Earth's long memory. And if that's true, if the planet has done this before, then what other secrets lie frozen in places we haven't looked yet? What else might be waiting under the ice to tell us that everything we think we know about our past is wrong? The ocean has pulled back like a curtain, revealing a stage no human was meant to see. 120 meters. That's how far the sea level dropped when the ice locked away Earth's water. 120 meters of ocean floor exposed to sunlight for the first time in millions of years. You're standing on what should be the bottom of the English Channel, but there's no water here. Just rolling hills, meandering rivers, and forests stretching to horizons that shouldn't exist. This is Doggerland, Europe's lost continent. And 15,000 years ago, you could walk from London to Paris without getting your feet wet. But Doggerland is just the beginning. The Earth has been hiding entire worlds. Picture this, a landmass larger than India connecting Siberia to Alaska. Not a narrow bridge, a vast country of grasslands, rivers, and forests teeming with life. The Bering Strait? It doesn't exist. Instead, Beringia spreads for hundreds of thousands of square kilometers, a highway for giants. Massive herds of mammoth thunder across endless plains. Saber-toothed cats stalk through forests that stretch from what will become Russia to what will become America. And humans, small bands of hunters with weapons made of stone and bone, follow the herds across a continent that the ocean will soon swallow forever. In Southeast Asia, another impossible world emerges from the retreating sea. Sunderland, a continent connecting Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, and Vietnam into one massive landmass. Rivers the size of the Amazon flow through jungles so thick that sunlight barely touches the ground. This isn't a collection of islands. This is a lost civilization's worth of land. Australia isn't an island, it's part of Sahul, a supercontinent including New Guinea and Tasmania. You can walk from Melbourne to Papua New Guinea through landscapes that exist nowhere on Earth today. Unique ecosystems, species that evolved in isolation for millions of years, all of it connected by land that will vanish beneath waves. But here's what makes your spine tingle with dread. People lived there. Not just lived, thrived. They built settlements along riverbanks that are now hundreds of meters underwater. They developed cultures, languages, technologies, and trade networks across continents that modern maps claim never existed. And when the ice melted, it buried it all. Sonar mapping of the ocean floor reveals ghost rivers still carved into the seabed. Underwater archaeologists find stone tools and pottery shards in places that have been submerged for 10,000 years. Off the coast of India, they've discovered structures, walls, foundations, what might be entire cities, lying in perfect preservation beneath hundreds of feet of water. The myths, remember. Plato wrote about Atlantis, a powerful civilization destroyed by the sea in a single day. Hindu texts describe Dwarka, Krishna's golden city, swallowed by rising waters. Celtic legends tell of Cantria Garlod, the drowned kingdom beneath the waves of Cardigan Bay. Aboriginal Dreamtime stories describe coastlines that stretched much farther out to sea before the waters came to claim them.
These weren't fantasies. These were memories. But the most chilling discovery lies in the timing. The sea didn't rise gradually. It didn't creep up coastlines over centuries, giving people time to adapt, to move inland, to save their cultures and their knowledge. It rose in pulses, massive surges of water that could drown entire civilizations in a matter of decades. When glacial lakes burst their ice dams, they sent continent-sized floods racing across the landscape. When ice sheets collapsed, they dumped enough fresh water into the oceans to raise global sea levels by meters in a single human lifetime. Imagine watching your world disappear. Not slowly, quickly. Rivers that your grandparents fished in are now arms of the sea. Hunting grounds where your great-grandparents tracked mammoth are now beneath hundreds of feet of salt water. The sacred places, the burial grounds, the settlements built up over thousands of years, all of it claimed by waves that seemed to have no end. The survivors fled inland. They carried what they could, tools, weapons, stories. But they left behind everything else. Entire chapters of human history now lie scattered across ocean floors, waiting for deep-sea explorers to piece together civilizations that the textbooks claim never existed. And here's the terrifying truth. We've barely begun to look. Less than 5% of the ocean floor has been mapped in detail. Less than 1% has been explored by human eyes. Beneath thousands of square kilometers of water lie landscapes that supported human life for millennia, cities that were old when the pyramids were built, technologies and knowledge systems that might rewrite everything we think we know about ancient humanity. What else is down there? What other secrets are waiting in the deep places where light has never returned since the waters rose? And what if some of those secrets are still alive? The ground trembles beneath your feet, not from earthquakes, from footsteps. Across the endless grasslands of the mammoth steppe, a herd approaches. But these aren't cattle, these aren't buffalo, these are giants. The bull mammoth leading the herd stands 4 meters tall at the shoulder, his tusks spiral upward like ancient ivory towers, each one longer than a grown man. His shaggy coat ripples in the Arctic wind, and his tiny eyes hold an intelligence that make your blood run cold. He's not afraid of you. Why would he be? You're just another predator in a world where predators rule everything. And you're not even the biggest predator here. Behind you, something coughs, a sound like boulders grinding together. You turn, slowly, and see death incarnate padding through the snow. The cave lion is twice the size of any modern big cat. Its shoulders bunch with muscle that could snap a human spine with one casual swipe. Its mane is darker than midnight, and its amber eyes track your movement with the patience of something that has never known failure. This is the mammoth steppe, a super ecosystem that once stretched from Spain to Alaska, supporting more large animal biomass than Africa's Serengeti ever dreamed of. Grasslands so vast that herds could migrate for months without seeing the same horizon twice. And every single animal here is designed to kill you. The woolly rhinoceros lowers its massive head, showing off a horn that could pierce armor plating. Giant ground sloths, each one the size of an SUV, rear up on their hind legs to strip bark from trees with claws that could disembowel a predator in one swipe. Short-faced bears, the largest land predators that ever lived, hunt in territories the size of modern countries. But the true kings of this world are the cats. Saber-toothed tigers with fangs longer than kitchen knives, American cheetahs built for speed across open plains, scimitar cats with serrated teeth designed to slice through thick mammoth hide, cave lions that hunt in coordinated prides, taking down prey that dwarfs anything modern predators would dare to attack.
And somehow, impossibly, humans not only survived here, they thrived. The caves of Chauvet, Lascaux and Altamira tell the story in images more powerful than any words. Human artists who lived alongside these monsters didn't just fear them, they understood them. Cave paintings show lions in motion, their muscles perfectly rendered, their expressions captured with the skill of someone who had watched them hunt, studied their behavior, learned their weaknesses. These weren't primitive scratches on stone, these were field guides. Survival manuals painted by people who shared the landscape with creatures that could crush them without thinking. In Ukraine, archaeologists have found entire houses built from mammoth bones. Rib cages for walls, tusks for roof beams, skulls for foundations. These weren't desperate shelters, they were architecture. Humans had learned to use the bodies of giants to protect themselves from other giants. They carved flutes from the wing bones of giant vultures. They made spear points from mammoth ivory. They turned the teeth of cave bears into jewelry and the claws of giant ground sloths into tools. They were recycling apocalypse into art. But the relationship went deeper than just predator and prey. Footprints preserved in ancient lake beds show human tracks walking alongside mammoth tracks, not hunting them, following them, learning from them. Using their knowledge of water sources, their ability to break through snow, their ancient migration routes carved into genetic memory over millions of years. The mammoths were guides, teachers, partners in a world where partnership could mean the difference between life and frozen death. Some cultures never forgot this relationship. Siberian shamans still speak of mammoth spirits that guide the souls of the dead to the afterlife. Native American traditions describe thunder beasts whose bones emerge from the earth after storms, bringing power and protection to those who treat them with respect. In ancient Norse mythology, the giants weren't always enemies. Sometimes they were teachers, holders of ancient wisdom from the time before the world was made. Because they remembered when giants actually walked the earth. But something went wrong. Starting around 12,000 years ago, the giants began to die. Not from disease, not from natural aging. They died completely. Entire species that had dominated ecosystems for millions of years vanished in what geologists call an extinction pulse, the biological equivalent of a light switch being turned off. Woolly mammoths, saber-toothed cats, giant ground sloths, short-faced bears, cave lions, all of them gone within a few thousand years. The mammoth steppe, which had supported the richest megafauna ecosystem in Earth's history, became empty grassland. Then it became tundra. Then it became memory. What killed them? The official story blames climate change.
As the world warmed and the ice sheets melted, habitats shifted too quickly for large animals to adapt. Forests replaced grasslands, rainfall patterns changed, food sources disappeared. But the timeline doesn't add up. These species had survived previous warming periods. They'd adapted to climate change before. Some of them, like the mammoth, had lived through multiple ice ages, evolving and thriving as temperatures rose and fell. So why did this time kill them all? Some scientists point to a different culprit: humans. As human populations grew and hunting techniques improved, large animals faced a new kind of predator. One that used tools, hunted in coordinated groups, and could kill from a distance with spears and arrows. Humans didn't just hunt for food, they hunted for materials. Mammoth ivory, cave bear fur, saber-toothed fangs for status symbols and trade goods. Archaeological sites across North America show evidence of kill sites, places where entire herds of mammoth or giant bison were driven off cliffs, butchered, and left to rot. Overkill on industrial scale. But even this doesn't explain everything.
Many of the extinctions happened in places where human populations were tiny. Some species disappeared from continents where humans had lived alongside them for tens of thousands of years without driving them extinct. Something else was happening. Recent research has uncovered evidence of what might have been the final blow: cosmic impact. Around 12,900 years ago, something from space, possibly a comet or asteroid, exploded over North America. The impact triggered massive fires, climate chaos, and environmental destruction that finished off species already stressed by warming temperatures and human hunting. The evidence is written in geological layers, a thin band of sediment containing microscopic diamonds, rare metals, and charcoal from continental-scale wildfires. This black mat appears at archaeological sites across North America, marking the exact moment when the Age of Giants ended. But here's what keeps paleontologists awake at night. Not all of them died. In remote corners of Siberia, mammoth populations survived until 4,000 years ago, living on Wrangel Island when the Egyptian pyramids were already ancient. Saber-toothed cats might have persisted in South America until just a few hundred years ago. And cave lions, there are reports, unconfirmed but persistent, of lion-like creatures in places where no lions should exist. What if some of the giants are still out there? What if, in the deepest forests, the most remote tundra, the places where humans still fear to go, something waits that remembers when the world belonged to creatures larger than dreams? And what if they remember us, too? The indigenous people of Siberia believe that mammoths still live underground, traveling through tunnels beneath the permafrost. They say that when a mammoth surfaces and breathes air, it dies, which is why their bodies are found perfectly preserved in the melting ice. But what if they're wrong about the breathing part? What if the mammoths aren't dying when they surface? What if they're just waiting? Civilizations collapsed because people stayed silent when they should have acted. Don't repeat their mistake here. If you're still watching, then you care about stories like this, so prove it. Like the video, subscribe, and turn on notifications right now. Otherwise, this story gets buried, forgotten, just like the civilizations we speak of. Back to our story. Fire is life. Fire is God. Fire's the thin line between humanity and the hungry darkness that wants to swallow everything warm. The woman tends the flames with hands that shake, not from cold, but from knowledge. She knows that if these embers die, her children die, her husband dies, her entire bloodline vanishes into the frozen void that stretches endlessly in every direction. This is 18,000 years ago in what will someday be called Ukraine. But Ukraine doesn't exist yet. Countries don't exist. Cities don't exist. There is only the fire and the darkness and the terrible space between them where humans dare to live.
Around her, the most incredible structure ever built rises into the Arctic night. It's a house made of death. Mammoth skulls form the foundation, each one the size of a small car, arranged in a perfect circle. Ribs arch overhead like the beams of a cathedral, lashed together with sinew and hide. Tusks spiral upward to support a roof made from mammoth skin, sealed against the wind with fat and mud. Inside this palace of bones, 15 people huddle around the sacred fire. They wear clothes that would make Arctic gear look primitive, layered furs tailored with precision that wouldn't be matched by European tailors for another 15,000 years. Their boots are waterproof, their coats shed ice, their mittens allow fine manipulation while keeping fingers from freezing solid. They have turned the corpses of giants into a home. But the house is just the beginning. Look closer at what these primitive humans have created. Bone needles so fine they could stitch silk, ivory figurines carved with details that require magnification to appreciate, spear throwers that multiply the force of human arms, turning hunters into long-distance killers capable of bringing down prey 10 times their size. And then there's the art.
By flickering firelight, a young man mixes pigments made from crushed minerals and animal fat. His canvas is the curved ceiling of a cave, and his subjects are the predators that stalk outside. Lions with muscles rippling beneath their painted fur. Rhinoceroses charging with horns lowered. Mammoth herds so realistic you can almost hear them trumpeting. But these aren't just pictures, they're maps, hunting guides, spiritual blueprints for surviving in a world where humans rank somewhere near the bottom of the food chain. The cave painter knows exactly how a lion moves when it's about to attack. He knows which muscles tense, which angle the head takes, where the eyes focus. He's studied death close enough to paint its portrait, and his art might be the key to helping his people avoid becoming its next victim. This is survival as spiritual practice. But survival demands more than just tools and shelters. It demands movement. The ice is pushing them south. Glaciers advance year by year, grinding forests into splinters, turning fertile valleys into frozen wasteland. Entire tribes pack everything they own onto sleds made from mammoth ribs and flee toward rumors of warmth. They retreat into refugia, tiny pockets of habitable land scattered across a continent of ice. The valleys of southern France, the caves of northern Spain, the coastlines of Italy before they're drowned by rising seas. Each refuge holds a few hundred people, maybe a few thousand, all that remains of human civilization in Europe. They are islands of warmth in an ocean of death. But some humans refuse to retreat. On the steppes of Siberia, where winter lasts 9 months and summer is a brief dream of grass and flowers, people are doing something unprecedented. They're adapting. They learn to read weather in the behavior of reindeer. They discover which plants remain nutritious even when frozen. They develop hunting techniques specifically designed for prey that can run across snow faster than humans can walk. Most importantly, they learn to think like nomads. Everything they own must fit on a sled. Every shelter must be built from materials they can find or carry. Every skill must be passed down through stories and songs that can survive even if the storyteller doesn't. They become the first global citizens, not by choice, but by necessity. And then something extraordinary happens. They start to move. Not just south to escape the ice, not just following herds for food, they begin migrations, planned expeditions across thousands of kilometers of the most hostile terrain on Earth. Some head northeast, following the mammoth herds across Beringia into a continent that has never known human footprints.
They become the first Americans, walking across a land bridge that will vanish beneath the waves before their great-great-grandchildren are born. Others push southeast, island hopping through the connected landmasses of Sunderland, reaching Australia in boats that leave no trace in the archaeological record. They navigate by stars, by currents, by the flight patterns of birds, crossing open ocean with Stone Age technology to reach shores that no human has ever seen. Still others follow the retreating ice sheets north, becoming the ancestors of the Sami, the Inuit, the peoples who would learn to thrive in landscapes that never fully escaped the grip of the Ice Age. They scatter across the globe like seeds from a dying tree. But here's what makes your skin crawl with recognition. They carry the same stories. In the Amazon rainforest, indigenous peoples tell of a great flood that covered the world, forcing their ancestors to flee to high ground. In Australia, Aboriginal Dreamtime stories describe the rising of the seas and the drowning of the coastal lands where their people once lived. In North America, tribes separated by thousands of miles share nearly identical flood myths, tales of waters that rose without warning, swallowing whole nations.
Norse mythology speaks of Ragnarok, the end of the world in ice and fire. Hindu texts describe cycles of destruction and renewal, ages when the world itself becomes the enemy of life. Even the Bible's flood story, Noah and his ark, echoes with memories of ice sheets collapsing and ancient worlds drowning beneath rising seas. How is this possible? These cultures had no contact with each other for tens of thousands of years. They developed independently on different continents, speaking different languages, adapting to different environments. Yet they all remember the same catastrophe. The answer lies in the deep structure of human memory. Trauma this profound doesn't just affect individuals, it rewrites the genetic code of entire species. The knowledge of what Earth can do, how quickly paradise can become hell, becomes embedded in human DNA, like a warning written in a language older than words. We carry the Ice Age in our bones. But some humans carried more than just memories. At Sunyir in Russia, archaeologists have found burials that make no sense. A man buried with 3,000 carved ivory beads, each one representing hours of skilled labor. 2 children interred with spears made from straightened mammoth tusks, weapons too large for them to have ever used in life. These aren't the graves of desperate survivors. These are the tombs of royalty. Even in the depths of the Ice Age, even when survival demanded every calorie and every moment of daylight, humans were creating beauty, hierarchy, culture. They were proving that consciousness could triumph over environment, that the human spirit could shine brighter than the sacred fires that kept them alive. But the most incredible discovery was still to come. In Chile, at a site called Monte Verde, archaeologists found evidence of human habitation dating to 14,500 years ago. This shouldn't be possible. According to conventional theory, the first Americans crossed Beringia around 13,000 years ago and gradually moved south. But the evidence doesn't lie. Humans were living at the southern tip of South America before they supposedly entered North America. They had crossed 2 continents, navigated through or around massive ice sheets, and established settlements in some of the most remote corners of the Earth, all faster than anyone thought possible. How did they move so quickly? What were they running from? Recent genetic studies have revealed something even more disturbing. Analysis of ancient DNA shows that human populations went through a severe bottleneck during the Ice Age, periods when the entire species nearly went extinct.
There were moments when fewer than 10,000 humans existed on the entire planet. We almost didn't make it. But the survivors, those few thousand people scattered across the refugia of Europe, the steppes of Siberia, the highlands of Africa, carried something precious in their genetic code. Not just the ability to survive, but the drive to explore. The curiosity to see what lies beyond the next mountain, the next ocean, the next ice sheet. They carried the seed of civilization itself. And as the ice began to retreat, as new lands opened up and the seas rose to swallow the old ones, these scattered survivors began to move again. But this time, they weren't just running from the ice. They were running towards something. Something that would reshape the world more completely than any glacier. Something that would allow humans to stop being nomads and start being builders. Something that would give birth to cities, to kings, to writing systems that could preserve knowledge across generations. But first, the world had to end one more time. The sound starts like distant thunder, but thunder doesn't last for days. Across the vastness of North America, the Laurentide ice sheet is screaming. 4 kilometers of ice, accumulated over tens of thousands of years, is collapsing in geological real time. Chunks the size of mountains break free and crash into valleys, creating earthquakes that can be felt 1,000 kilometers away. Rivers of meltwater, each one carrying more water than all the world's modern rivers combined, carve canyons in a matter of weeks. The age of ice is ending, and it's ending violently.
This isn't the gentle warming you might imagine. This isn't a slow spring thaw that gradually reveals green grass beneath white snow. This is catastrophe. Climate change so rapid and brutal that it makes modern global warming look like a minor fluctuation. In some places, temperatures rise 10 degrees Celsius in a single decade. Entire ice sheets, stable for millennia, vanish in a few human lifetimes. Coastlines that have remained unchanged since before humans learned to speak are drowned beneath hundreds of feet of water in just a few generations. The Earth is reshaping itself. But the most terrifying part isn't the speed, it's the chaos. Around 12,900 years ago, just when the world seems to be warming into a new golden age, something goes catastrophically wrong. Temperatures plummet back toward Ice Age levels almost overnight. The brief spring becomes a 1,000-year winter called the Younger Dryas, a climate disaster so severe that it nearly wipes out human civilization before civilization properly begins. What caused it? The evidence points to something so violent, so unprecedented, that it reads like science fiction. Something from space hit the Earth. The Younger Dryas impact hypothesis suggests that a comet or asteroid, possibly multiple fragments from a larger object, exploded over North America around 12,900 years ago. The blast triggered continent-wide fires, launched millions of tons of debris into the atmosphere, and disrupted ocean currents that regulate global climate. The evidence is written in layers of rock across 2 continents. Microscopic diamonds created by extreme pressure and heat, rare metals that only form in cosmic impacts, charcoal from fires that burned across thousands of square kilometers. This black mat appears at the exact moment when the Clovis culture, North America's first widespread human civilization, vanished from the archaeological record. The impact didn't just kill the megafauna, it nearly killed us too. But humans are harder to kill than mammoths. While giant ground sloths and saber-toothed cats went extinct, humans adapted. They developed new hunting techniques for smaller prey. They learned to fish and gather plants. They began the slow process of figuring out how to survive in a world where the giants were gone and the climate could change without warning. And then they did something revolutionary. They stopped moving. For hundreds of thousands of years, humans had been nomads, following herds, following seasons, following resources across landscapes that changed constantly. But as the ice retreated and the climate stabilized, mostly, some groups began to experiment with staying in one place. In the Fertile Crescent, the green valleys between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, people noticed that wild grains grew thicker in places where they had camped. Seeds scattered from their food stores took root and flourished. Animals that had once been hunted began lingering near human settlements, feeding on scraps and gradually becoming less wild. Agriculture wasn't invented, it was discovered. But agriculture was just the beginning. When humans stopped wandering, they could accumulate things. Tools that were too heavy to carry, pottery that was too fragile for nomadic life, knowledge that took more than one lifetime to develop. They could build permanent shelters, they could store surplus food, they could support specialists, people whose only job was to make better tools or create art, or remember stories or figure out when to plant seeds for the best harvest. They could build civilization. The first cities rose from the mud of ancient riverbeds. Jericho, Çatalhöyük, Tel Es-Salwan, settlements that grew from a few dozen people to thousands, then tens of thousands. People who had never seen each other's faces cooperated on massive construction projects. They developed systems of writing to keep track of grain stores and trade agreements. They created laws to govern behavior and rituals to honor gods who controlled the harvest. The world that the Ice Age built was giving birth to history itself.
But the old world didn't die quietly. Around the globe, cultures that had never had contact with each other began telling the same story. A great flood that covered the earth, destroying an earlier civilization and forcing the survivors to start over. The Sumerian epic of Gilgamesh describes Utnapishtim building an ark to survive waters that rose above the mountains. The Hindu Matsya Purana tells of Manu, who saved life on earth by building a great ship when the world was consumed by flood. The Bible's Noah, the Greek Deucalion, the Aztec Coxcox, all of them survivors of world-ending floods that their gods sent to punish or purify humanity. These weren't fairy tales. These were survivor testimonies. As the ice sheets collapsed, they didn't just release water, they released biblical quantities of water. Glacial Lake Agassiz, formed by melting ice in North America, contained more water than all the Great Lakes combined. When its ice dam failed, it sent a flood racing toward the Atlantic Ocean that temporarily shut down the Gulf Stream and plunged the world back into near Ice Age conditions. Similar floods happened on every continent where ice sheets collapsed. In Europe, the Baltic ice lake drained catastrophically when retreating ice opened new channels to the sea. In Asia, glacial lakes in the Himalayas burst their barriers and sent walls of water racing down river valleys. The rising seas didn't just drown Doggerland and Beringia. They created flood myths that would echo through every human culture for the next 10,000 years. But perhaps the most disturbing discovery is how fast it all happened. Ice cores from Greenland show that major climate shifts during the end of the Ice Age occurred in spans as short as 3 years. 3 years to go from Ice Age conditions to temperate climate. 3 years for ecosystems that had been stable for millennia to completely reorganize. 3 years for the world to become unrecognizable. Modern climate scientists look at this data and see a warning written in ice. Earth's climate isn't a stable system that changes gradually. It's a chaotic system that can flip between states with terrifying speed. The same mechanisms that ended the Ice Age, ice sheet collapse, ocean current disruption, greenhouse gas release, are happening again today. But this time, instead of natural warming triggering the changes, human activity is pushing the system toward its tipping points.
And we're pushing much faster than the natural cycles ever did. The Ice Age took 100,000 years to build up and 8,000 years to collapse. Modern climate change is happening in decades. We're conducting an experiment on the planet's climate system using greenhouse gas levels that haven't existed since long before the Ice Age began. What happens when a chaotic system gets pushed too hard, too fast? We're about to find out. The last time Earth's climate changed this rapidly, it triggered mass extinctions, continental floods, and the collapse of entire ecosystems. It nearly wiped out human civilization before civilization properly existed. But it also triggered the greatest explosion of human creativity and innovation in our species' history. The pressure of surviving in a rapidly changing world forced humans to develop agriculture, build cities, create writing systems, and establish the foundations of everything we now call civilization. Crisis and opportunity are written in the same alphabet. The question is whether modern humans, with our cities built on coastlines that didn't exist 15,000 years ago, our agriculture dependent on stable weather patterns, our global economy built on the assumption that the future will resemble the past, can adapt as quickly as our Ice Age ancestors did. The ice is gone, the giants are extinct, the great continental bridges have drowned beneath the waves, but the lesson remains, carved in glacial valleys and preserved in flood myths. The world can change overnight. The only question is whether we're ready.
What would you do if you woke up tomorrow and found yourself living through the end of the world? What would you save? What would you abandon? How would you rebuild? The Ice Age survivors face these questions with nothing but stone tools and sacred fire. We face them with nuclear weapons and smartphones. Who do you think has the better odds? Every viewer leaves a trace, just like every civilization leaves a mark. If you don't leave yours, this story risks being buried by time. So make your mark now. Like this video, subscribe to this channel, and turn on notifications, because history only remembers those who act.